Hello friends, welcome back to DIY guitar making. We're doing Q&A today. I don't have too much stuff to talk about before we dive into the Q&A. I'll just say I'm kind of in an in-between period right now between workshops. I have my next workshop coming up December 1st. 2 guys are coming out. That workshop's already booked. There's one more workshop after that, which is open. I forget the dates, but it's at the end of December. Gets close to Christmas, but you know, obviously we don't go over Christmas. I figure that's the reason why that particular workshop hasn't filled up. So I might end up just pulling that off the schedule if someone doesn't want to jump on that, say, right after you see this video. I might just pull it down. It was my mistake thinking I could schedule a workshop that close to Christmas. The last day of it is, I think, December 22nd or December 23rd. So it would probably only work for someone who was visiting family, say, in Pennsylvania and wanted to do a workshop, walk away with a guitar at the end, and hey, maybe that guitar is the gift you're giving your loved one on Christmas when you visit them in Pennsylvania. Kind of a shot in the dark here. One more thing. This morning, I was doing a bit of reading. American Luthiery. This is a wonderful publication that the Guild of American Luthiers puts out. And I ran across an article called, where is it? I ran across an article called Foolproof Straight Saddle Slotting Jig by Bo Hannum. And so for you guys who watch these Q&As, in the last Q&A, a couple people had mentioned that Bo Hannum has a video on how to make a saddle slotting jig similar to, say, Stu Mac's saddle slotting jig. Or actually, I don't know if his is similar. I haven't read the article. But it's a way of getting around having to buy the Stu Mac saddle slotting jig. And I just ran into the article here in American Luthiery. So if you guys are already subscribed to this publication, it's in number 147. That way you can read it in article form if you want, if you so prefer, which I like to do. So that's kind of cool, and you know, I like sharing that kind of stuff because, hey, that's my job. I'm here to help you guys in your journey with guitar making. So any direction I can point you guys that helps. This was something that a lot of people were asking about. A lot of people don't want to buy that jig, but still want to route their saddles over the body. And there's a great article there by Bo Hannum. Actually, I haven't read it, so I can't say it's great. It's probably great because Bo Hannum's great. Check it out. Anyway, let's get into the Q&As. I have the question of the week up there. I put it in a little bit late, so I didn't really give you guys a fair amount of time to answer it. And it's a good question, but I'm going to read the question here anyway, just so I can kick it out to you guys so that both you guys on YouTube and everyone in the members forum at least gets a shot at giving their 2 cents. And I'm sure you guys are going to have a lot to say about this. The question of the week is, what material choices have made a noticeable impression on you as far as the acoustic response goes? And I do have 2 answers so far. Patrick writes, I don't know enough about it yet. So far I've been going for looks. I definitely listen to as many experts, he says with quotes, as possible. And fair enough, Patrick. That's actually a great way to go about things. A lot of things I go for looks as well. The back plate, I really don't put a lot of stock into tonally. The woods I tend to use, the woods that tend to look really cool, tend to be tropical hardwoods anyway, so they work great as resonators. But hey, you don't really even have to think like that. I think when it comes to the back and sides, you can just, you know, find something really pretty to use. The top is where you want to, if you're going to give it any thought, that's where you want to give it the most consideration, both with the wood choice for the soundboard itself and with the bracing. But that's great. Yeah, just listen to as many people as you can, and hey, we're all right, but we're all also wrong in other cases. We're all kind of using our intuition and our experience to make educated guesses at best. And so what works for one person might not work for somebody else, especially because we're all building with different goals in mind. You might be building a guitar for more projection and headroom, like say for a bluegrass player that wants to be heard over the fiddle and other instruments in a jam. Or you might be playing more or building more for a fingerstyle player or someone playing in a more intimate setting where you just want a well-balanced instrument that resonates well and has a lot of sustain. You know, typically those guitars are described as warm, right, and rich because they have complexity between the notes. Two different things, really. Do you want to drive the top, or do you just want to let your notes speak for themselves? Now, LC Guitars says, the biggest difference I have noticed from doing repair work has been replacing cheap plastic bridge pins from some fairly high-end guitars with real wood bridge pins. I mean, come on, Martin and Taylor, use some real wood bridge pins. You know, I agree with that. Maybe even not for, I don't know about even tone with that. The bridge pins, I don't know. It's not something I've explored, whether or not the bridge pins, you know, make a big difference. I'm not saying that they don't. But regardless, I agree with him just on the basis of, you know, we're talking about a very small, inexpensive material regardless, or not material, inexpensive part of the guitar regardless of what material you build it out of, unless you build it out of diamonds or gold or something. It kind of blows my mind, too, that on even high-end factory guitars, you'll still see plastic binding or plastic bridge pins, plastic side dots even. You know, the dots on the side of the fretboard for the musician. Those are often plastic, and they look so much better if you just put a little tiny dot of mother of pearl in there. It'll match the mother of pearl on the fretboard face, and hey, it's mother of pearl. Like it's a real material. These modern plastics and carbon fiber and stuff, they're cool. You can do a lot of novel things with them. They're a giant leap in technology. But there's something just more real about solid wood. And most of the guitar is already made out of solid wood. And so having just a couple small things here or there that are plastic, to me, just in a sort of nebulous, abstract way, not in a technical way, but just in a way that hits me right here, it just hurts. It kills the mojo of the guitar, I think. I've said this before about plastic pick guards, and I use plastic. I use Mylar. It seems to be the best solution for that problem, but at the same time, it kind of kills me because it's the only not real, as I call it, material on the entire guitar. Everything else is solid wood and bone and steel. Anyway, that's his 2 cents and my 2 cents sort of combined right there to make 4 cents, technically. How about that? All right, let's go read some more of your questions here. Questions and comments. So we're still in the members forum, and we are going to read a question on nut compensation from Tony D. Okay, Tony D writes, what are your thoughts on nut compensation? As I understand it, the process of applying it is to just shorten the fretboard at the nut end by a little before fixing it in place. But how much is a little, and does it really make a difference? Am I right in thinking that when I buy a template, nut compensation isn't included? Okay, so there's several questions there. The last one, when you buy a template, that is correct. Nut compensation is not considered at all in that template. You do have to shorten the nut. So if you have your fretboard with all the slots cut, you have to shorten the nut a little bit so that you can create a nut or cut a nut to have its ramp points, its peak points, in positions that are either slightly further towards the saddle or slightly further away from the saddle, hence giving you either a flattening or a sharpening effect depending on which way you go with it. As I'm saying all this, keep in mind, nut compensation is, I'm giving you my understanding of it, but it's not something that I do or have any experience with. So I'm just trying to give you my best understanding of it. And really, I want to kick this out to you guys, and I expect to hear some knowledgeable people talking about this in the comments, and we can further discuss this in the next Q&A. But let me give you what I think would be like a base level understanding of what nut compensation is. Please correct me if I'm wrong, because again, I don't do this, guys. This is not something that is in my wheelhouse. Here's how I understand it. So I've got my parlor guitar here. I'm going to use this as an example. So first, right off the bat, just understand that when we talk about intonation and compensation, we are always talking about the art of compromise. Everything we're doing is a compromise. Notice we don't use words like perfecting. That's not what we're doing. We're not, when you intonate, you're not setting a perfect pitch distributed across all of the fret positions. What you're really doing is finding the best compromise so that the out of tuneness that you experience throughout the various fret positions will be distributed enough so that it's trivial and the average player doesn't notice it at all. That's the goal here. It's not perfection because you actually can't get perfection. I don't want to get too into that, but it has to do with the fact that it's a fretted instrument. It has to do with the material differences between all of the strings and their modulus of elasticity, and the fact that when you fret a fretted instrument, you are pressing that string down to the fretboard, thus stretching the string. When you stretch a string, you create tension. Tension raises the pitch, makes it go sharp. All of that is just sort of at the root of the compensation problem. Key thing to keep in mind here is we are going for compromise, not perfection. With that said, on a guitar with all of its compensation just happening at the saddle, typically what we do is you compare the open note on a string to the fretted note at the 12th fret. That's our octave. And then you make your adjustments at the saddle by either pushing that point forward or pushing that point backwards to either lengthen the string or shorten the string. And so as far as I understand it with nut compensation, the issue is this. People who compensate the nut say that, and I'm not saying that they're wrong, claim that they can get a slightly better compromise than just pure saddle compensation. And the reason for that has to do with the fact that when we play like our cowboy chords, we're playing, this guitar's out of tune, and that's fine for the purpose of this explanation. We're playing some open strings and some fretted strings, and sometimes the most egregious examples of out of tuneness when we're playing a guitar is with those open chords, because it's between the open notes. Like say if I'm playing a G chord, the D and the G string are open, and when you compare that to say the fretted B string at the 3rd fret, that's often where people hear, if they hear anything at all, they hear a more noticeable out of tuneness. And so the idea with nut compensation is that we're going to first do our saddle compensation and the tuning up of the strings a little bit differently. We're going to place a capo on here at the 1st fret. Okay, so that isolates the nut. It takes it out of the equation. Now, the 1st fret is our 0 fret. And so we're going to compare that 1st fret note to the 13th fret. And you're going to do all your intonation that way. Why the 13th fret? Well, because we have the capo on there now, right? That pushes our octave up 1. All right, so you compare the 1st to the 13th and set your saddle action. Then you can take this off, and now we can adjust the compensation at the nut as needed by, I believe, comparing now, like we did in the original example, the open note to the 12th fret. And by making first the adjustments at the saddle, don't neglect that, of course. We do that first and then make the nut compensations. You get a slightly better compensation when you play those open chords. Is it worth it? I don't know. Most guitars don't have it. Most players aren't bothered by this stuff. And So yeah, I would say it's just a very personal decision whether you want to experiment with that or not. And it's not something I've experimented with. So all I can give you is what I just gave you, my sort of basic understanding. And maybe I even got that wrong. So honestly, please let me know in the comments if my understanding is a little bit off. But hopefully somebody else in the comments can help us out with the implementation, because that's at the heart of what you were asking, was basically what do I do? How do I shorten the fretboard at the nut a little bit? And I believe the answer is yes, but we will wait and see on that. So thank you, Tony D. Let's see what else we got in the members forum here before we move to YouTube. Okay, and so Larry Kuhn has a follow-up on a thread that we talked about in the previous Q&A, where he was asking about spraying a canned nitrocellulose lacquer on a slotted headstock as opposed to a simple paddle-shaped headstock, say like a Martin style. And he was worried about getting that spray into the inside corners, as he should be worried about, of those slots. And so his follow-up here, he writes, I did try to mist in some nitro. I think it isn't quite as clean as I'd like around the inside corners, but overall I'm pleased with the results. And he has some pictures here. Yeah, it looks good in here. I mean, I really can't tell from the pictures at least. But yeah, if you ever want to get it to true perfection, I just feel like you're going to have to do some hand rubbing in those inside corners. I think spraying is the problem in that case, if there's a problem at all. But hey, if it's working for you and if it's good enough, then I'm happy. All right, Larry Kuhn also has a post here on when to install frets. I just finished watching Eric's latest video where he asked for more questions. Here you go. This video also addressed the issue of when to install frets. I'm finishing my 5th and 6th guitars, and I've tried it both ways. I see trade-offs either way. On installing frets before attaching the fingerboard to the neck, the upside is I get to use the arbor press I spent a lot of money on, and on a more serious note, pressing does appear to be preferable to hammering. But the downside is I can't sand out the 14th fret hump. Now on installing frets with the fingerboard on the neck, but before attaching the neck to the guitar, it's less convenient to press frets and impractical for some frets. Some are pressed, some are hammered. And the downside is I still can't sand away the 14th fret hump. On installing frets after attaching the neck, which by the way guys is the way that I do it, he writes, I get to use the fret buck I spent a lot of money on, but the arbor press is now mostly useless. Per the above, all frets are now hammered with my admittedly amateur technique. I get 1 or 2 frets that refuse to seat all the way. I can sand away the 14th fret hump before the frets go on, and it's hard to file/deburr fret ends without messing up my nitro finish. Okay, it's because he's already got a finish on there. I'm looking for ways to do this better, and I'm encouraged by Eric's comment that it gets better with more experience on the next set. One thing that seems clear is that I have to clean up the fret ends before shooting the finish. Yes, that was my first thought there, actually. Hey, you want to do all your fret work. You want to always try and get finish to be as close to the last step on the overall build as you can possibly get it. Now for me, because I do a hand-rubbed finish, I can do that after the neck and the body are completely attached. And that way, there's very little risk of damaging the finish afterwards. Now, a lot of people are spraying the finish, and so they're spraying the body and the neck separately. And inevitably, there's just a lot of work that happens to the guitar after you spray your finish then. And there's no right answer there. Kind of like we were using the word compromise earlier. This is a different type of compromise. There really is no better way to do it because there's a lot of difficulties with hand rubbing a finish with the neck and the body attached. But at the same time, when I'm done finish, I'm basically done the guitar. I have to slap a pick guard on there and maybe install an end pin if I even want one on that guitar. But the guitar is basically done at that point. I've done everything except the setup, right? And all the fretwork is done. But yeah, even in this case, there's no reason why you shouldn't have your fret ends completely dressed. and then you do the finish. So good conclusion there that you came up with. But another thing I've observed is that all sorts of tricks and techniques exist for accomplishing tasks in Luthiery, so I'm wondering what advice you have. Thanks. Okay, well, that's it. That's my advice, and I think you already came to the right conclusion there. As always, he mentioned the 3 different points of the build where you can install the frets. You could do it first before the fretboard is attached to the neck. You could do it after the fretboard is attached to the neck. And lastly, you could do it after the fretboard is attached to the neck and the neck is attached to the body, which is the way I prefer to do it because, like he mentioned, that 14th fret hump, I like to put some shaping work into the fretboard, some subtle shaping work before I install the frets, rather than having to give the frets a serious fret level. Okay, and here's a comment from LC Guitars about bridge replacement. Back to Eric's recent video about guitars that are not financially viable for repair. Sometimes we get those sentimental repairs in. A young girl got this guitar from her grandmother and it means a lot to her, so her dad wanted to make sure it was repaired the right way. It is one of the Esteban guitars, limited edition, 25,000. Oh, I guess that means there's 25,000 made. The bird-shaped bridge was split at the bridge pins and lifted from the guitar with a huge belly bow. I finished removal of the bridge and clamped some cauls over the course of a week to get the belly out of it. Then made a Martin-style bridge to get a better gluing surface. Scraped all of the paint from under the bridge and glued the bridge down. After drying overnight, I reamed out the bridge pinholes and routed the saddle slot. I also installed a bridge doctor to help keep the belly from returning. The bridge doctor is not going to affect the sound on this guitar enough to notice and should help stabilize the top. I used a Graphtec saddle and pins with a new set of strings. It actually turned out way better than I could have imagined. The action is at 6/64ths on the bass side and 4/64ths on the treble. It plays great all the way up the neck, the intonation is great, and it sounds better than some of the $500 to $800 guitars I have worked on. All in, I charged for 4 hours labor, probably had closer to 6 hours involved, and about $60 in parts. I hope the new lease on life and the great playability inspires this young lady to stick with practice, and she is already interested in her and her dad coming and building an electric guitar in the future. Okay, so that thing I said at the end is he teaches electric guitar building classes. That's what he was referencing when he said that her and her dad were interested in the class, and that's great, man. Repair is a great way to get clients in for a number of things. You know, either selling your instruments. A lot of people use repairs as a springboard for selling their guitars, and hey, it's a springboard for selling your classes too. If you teach something like I do, an acoustic guitar build, or like he does, an electric guitar build. And he's got some pictures here, and man, you can see that split bridge, that bird-shaped bridge, which is very, very interesting, very unique. It sounds like a really good process using the bridge doctor to get rid of the belly bulge. The belly bulge is very important to deal with in that case. I don't have anything else to say about that. Okay. Let's jump to YouTube. Let's see what's going on over there. Okay, Greg and Muriel writes, "Hi Eric, Greg Emery here. I met you at the Woodstock Luthier show. As I told you then, your videos have helped me so much. My favorite guitar is one made by watching many hours of your videos over and over again. Thanks for all you do. You are greatly appreciated." All right, thank you. I thought there was a question at the end of that. But yeah, I remember meeting you at the show, Greg. And I was very, very glad to have you stop by and say hello and check out the guitars. And I hope you enjoyed the rest of the show and got to see some pretty cool stuff there. Mr. BT Cruiser writes, "It is always interesting to me on how luthiers solve making instrument components streamlined, accurate, and repeatable. From CNC, jigs, and various hand methods, all are interesting in their evolution. There was a video posted this past week from the Ratliff Mandolins channel showing the machine he created to cut out fret slots all in one pass. Personally, I would rather go down the CNC route, than the rather old school approach he took. Still, it is fascinating. Yeah, so I actually visited Stu Mack once, their, facility, and one of the things that I really took away from it that I saw them doing there was a guy who was just knocking out fretboards, and he had a table saw, axle, with 24 table saw blades on that single axle, and he would just simply pass a fretboard through. It's kind of horrifying to me, all 24 of those blades at once. I just think about the accuracy and the precision in setting that up, and if anything is slightly out of alignment or loose, perhaps you get a little wobble in the blades, I'd imagine the kickback is pretty serious. What you're talking about made me think of that really cool machine that they had for knocking that out. But yeah, you can also, nowadays, fret slots are often just CNC'd out. So there's many ways to go about it depending on the level of technology that you want to use or are able to use. I appreciate the video, and this is on the same video about fretboards. I appreciate the video. However, for about $20 to $30, you can have a decent fretboard already cut from a supplier. Absolutely true. It seems worth it to buy them unless you have a custom scale or some other need. Yes, I agree with that to a point, but most fretboards that you buy that are pre-made like that also have the radius on them. It doesn't give you a lot of room to deal with the 14th fret hump like we talked about earlier, to sand that away or sort of reshape the board if it's already sort of at its final shape. That's actually why I don't just buy pre-made fretboards like that. Although there's probably some supplier that just knocks out the fret slots for you and leaves the fretboard flat and oversized. And in that case, I'd agree. Let's see. Hi Eric, great video. What else do you use your planer for? I'm considering whether it is worth getting one. Do you use it for planing back, sides, tops? Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, a planer is just a infinitely useful tool just for rough milling your material, getting everything to its starting dimensions. Now, a lot of things in the guitar world, you also need some sort of thickness sander or drum sander, or just the ability to use a good, sharp, well-set plane to do the final thicknessing on, simply because a planer won't get you lower than 1/8 of an inch in thickness, because your material gets really unstable when it gets hyper thin to the thinness that we need them to be for guitar parts particularly. This is a very particular problem for luthiers and not so much in other areas of woodworking. So, if you're building furniture, typically a planer might be all you need to thickness your parts. So I just want to make that point. Some people understandably don't have the space or the budget to have both a planer and a drum sander, so you might just get a drum sander. That way you can get it below 1/8 of an inch. It's going to take you a lot longer. The planer speeds things up. It can get it down to 1/8 of an inch really quick, but it just can't go any lower than that. So that's all something to consider. Okay, and by unstable, by the way, when I say the wood gets unstable, what I mean is it becomes flexible, right? And suddenly when you're passing it under there, it can now kind of fluctuate around and rise up. And literally, if you try to get a set of sides down to 90 thousandths of an inch in preparation for bending, the cutter on your planer can and will just pull that wood right up into the cutter and basically shred it. It doesn't deal with very thin veneer-like wood like that. Something to keep in mind, but yes, a planer is so useful. When I cut out neck blanks and thickness those, cut out backs and sides, the initial thicknessing before final thicknessing on the drum sander, tops as well, and I mean, just everything. I mean, making jigs. Sometimes I'll need to run things through the planer just to get the wood down to a certain dimension. It's a tool for dimensioning your wood in the early stages. I'll put it like that. Mark Pell writes, Eric, enjoyed this guitar talk hangout with my morning coffee. Great start to a peaceful Sunday. You are really relaxed now that the show is behind you. So what's the next build? That's a great question. I actually don't know yet. I don't have a commission at the moment. So hey, if you guys want to see a build here on the show and then, you know, receive that build yourself, you can sign up at ericschaeferguitars.com to be the next commission. And also, I don't even have just some experimental thing in mind for myself. It was because a lot of the things you guys see on this channel, sometimes I'm building it for someone, but I'm not necessarily doing that. Sometimes I'm just building it basically for R&D, and ultimately that guitar is basically for myself or maybe for a friend or something. At some point I'll be making guitars for my kids when they get a little bit older. They're 1.5 and 2.5 right now, so a little too young to be able to handle something as fragile like a guitar without smashing it. But anyway, I don't know. It's actually really exhilarating to not know yet what I'm doing. I'm normally a little more planned out ahead of time, but it's going to be fun starting over in the planning stage for something completely different. I've never built a dreadnought guitar. I know that's pretty vanilla of an answer to say the next thing is a dreadnought guitar, but it might be that. I might build more parlor guitars and just do there's some different little nitty gritty things I want to work out with those. I don't know, you know, man, I've always been a little bit interested in multi-scale, so I might do something with that. I just don't know. I really have to think about it for a little bit. What do you guys want to see? Honestly, I'm not saying I'm going to do it necessarily. This isn't a poll. Well, it is a poll. I'd be interested to see what you guys would want to see on the channel. And if that dovetails well with my tastes and what I want to do going forward, then hey, maybe that's what we'll do. So yeah, why don't I make that a question of the week, actually. What do you guys want to see next here on the channel? And we'll end with that. That's a great way to end this Q&A. So please write in the comments what you guys think you want to see next on the channel. I mentioned a couple things there. The multi-scale guitar. I could do more with the parlor guitars. I could do a dreadnought. I could do something crazier. I don't know. I could do an acoustic bass guitar I've thought about doing, although that would require a lot of extra research because it's something very much outside of my wheelhouse. But I don't know. Let me know in the comments, and thanks for tuning in. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye for now. If you learned something here, please give this video a like and subscribe so you can be notified when I release a new DIY guitar making video. And if you want to really learn more, take one of my structured online courses at ericschaeferguitars.com or register for a hands-on guitar building workshop here with me in Burnville, Pennsylvania.